This can be. Hi. I'm just trying to organize my screens here. Okay. So today is April 23rd. And this week we have another double parsha. It's Acharei and Kedoshim. And so, as usual, we're going to do a summary of the parshas and also a summary of the two Haftarot and then some lessons from there. But after I prepared this class, my husband told me that Yom HaAtzmaut, which is Israel Independence Day, has its own Haftarah. And I found something super relevant to share. So I'm excited to get to that part, but that'll be towards the end. Okay, hang on. I have to resize my window so that I can scroll. Give me a second. Remember when I first got this Mac? I don't know how many of you have been with me for a long time. Like, I could not figure out how to have both things on the screen at the same time. So I mastered that. But okay, anyway, let's start with the first of the two of the double parshas called Acharei. And so Acharei means after the death of. Acharei is the regular Hebrew word for after. Lifnei means before. Acharei, Lifnei means before. Acharei means after. So it's found in Vayikra, in the book of Leviticus, chapter 16, verse 1. And what is the death that it's speaking about? It's talking about the death of the two sons of Aaron the high priest, Nadav and Abihu. I don't know what you know them as. And that God is warning against unauthorized entry into something that's holy. There's only, I was speaking to one of you privately this week who she had the impression that once the Mishkan was built or the tent of meeting, that it was a place that anybody could go to anytime they wanted in order to have a deeper connection with God. But actually only one person in the entire nation, who was the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, could go into this holy, holy, holy place once a year on the day of Yom Kippur, enter the innermost chamber of the sanctuary in order to offer Ketoret. Ketoret is this temple incense blend thing. That's a very, very deep idea. We're obviously not going to get into it, but it required a tremendous preparation. There was another feature of Yom Kippur, of the Day of Atonement, that was this one you might be more familiar with, casting the lots over two goats to determine which one is going to be offered to God and which one is going to be dispatched to carry the sins of Israel into the wilderness. This is where we get the English expression scapegoat. And the Parsha of Acharei also warns against bringing korbanot, which are animal or meal offerings, anywhere but the holy temple. That is, we learned this last week, that applies to Jews. Because remember, we learned about Naaman last week, who wanted to bring offerings in Syria, Aram, where he lived. It forbids the consumption of blood, the details prohibiting incest and other deviant sexual relations. That's a little summary of the Parsha. The second Parsha that we read also this week is Kedoshim, which also is the book of Vayikra, the book of Leviticus. This is chapter 19, verse 1 to chapter 20, verse 27. Kedoshim literally means holy ones or holy things. And it is related to the word kadosh, which means holy. And it's found in the very beginning of this Parsha in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 2. The Parsha of Kedoshim begins with a very famous statement. You shall be, this is God talking to the nation of Israel. You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. And it's followed by dozens of mitzvot, of divine commandments, through which a Jewish person sanctifies him or herself and relates to the holiness of God. In other words, a lot of what we are trying to do is to echo or create in our human experience as much holiness as possible. So it includes positive things that we do and things that we refrain from. So the prohibition would be like against idolatry. But a positive thing would be the mitzvah of giving charity, or the principle of equality before the law, the idea of honoring the Shabbat, of the opposite of immorality, sexual immorality, would be sexual morality, honesty in business, honor, for your parents, honoring the sacredness of life. These are all laws that are discussed in this parsha of Kedoshim. And also, probably the most famous part of Kedoshim is the statement, love your fellow as yourself, which Rabbi Akiva, was one of the greatest Jewish sages, called a cardinal principle of Torah. And Hillel, another great rabbi, said, this is the entire Torah, the rest is commentary. Love your fellow as yourself. So it's a great principle of Torah. We find it in this parsha. Okay, that's the parsha. Now, let's look a little bit more deeply into the Haftarot for these parshiot. So the Haftarah for Acharei Mot comes from the book of Amos. Maybe you say Amos, chapter 9, verse 7 to 15. It's not so long. And it's talking about exile and punishment that's going to befall the nation for straying after the ways of heathens, which is the behavior that the Torah portion prohibits. So there's a connection there. So the prophet Amos is delivering God's message, as all of the prophets did, telling people what you're doing wrong and how to fix it. Okay, so he's reminding the people of all of the kind things that God did for the nation, taking them out of the land of Egypt, singling them out as the chosen nation, as whatever that means. But they kept messing up. And he's saying, that as a result of that, God destroyed the northern kingdom of Israel. But he's never going to completely destroy the nation of Israel, that the people will be scattered among other nations, but eventually will be returned to their land on the day of redemption. And that God will reinstall Beit David, the house of David, to its former glory, and there will be peace and abundance upon the land. This is very messianic language. And the Haftarah ends with God's promise, and I will return the captivity of my people Israel, and they shall rebuild desolate cities and inhabit them, and they shall plant vineyards and drink their wine, and they shall make gardens and eat their produce. And I will plant them on their land, and they shall no longer be uprooted from upon their land that I have given them, says the Lord your God. Now, as I was preparing this, I was thinking, both the Torah portion, both Torah portions, and the Haftarot, they're very like Jew-ocentric. And I was thinking, how am I ever going to extract something that's going to be valuable to you? I want to go on to the Haftarah for the second parsha, which is the second parsha is Kedoshim, and the Haftarah comes from Yechezkel, the book of Ezekiel, chapter 20, verses 2 through 20. And in that Haftarah, there's a lot of, what's the word, like rebuke of the nation of Israel, remembering God's repeated reminders to observe the commandments, to keep the Shabbat, to reject idol worship, which is obviously an echo of the Torah portion. And Ezekiel also has a message for the Jewish people from God, reminding them how he chose them as his nation, how he took them out of Egypt, promised to take them to the Holy Land, and how in Egypt God sent them a prophet, meaning Moses, who urged them to abandon their idolatry, but they didn't do so. And then he gave them all kinds of laws, and including the observance of Shabbat, as a sign, a special sign between Hashem and his people. But Ezekiel reminds them, the house of Israel rebelled against me in the wilderness. They walked not in my statutes, and they despised my ordinances, which if a man keep, he will live through them. And my Sabbaths they desecrated exceedingly. So there's a lot of finger wagging that's going on for this nation. And the prophet Ezekiel goes on to mention that God's punishment of the Jews in the desert, namely the ones that were not able to enter the Holy Land. And then he admonishes the children not to follow in their father's ways, but to observe the laws and to continue to sanctify the Shabbat. So you hear the same theme over and over again. God did all these amazing things for you. I'm just summarizing both the two parshiot and the two haftarot before we go on to some lessons we can derive. And then the very exciting part I don't want to share about the haftarah of from Yom HaAtzmaut. But he's reminding them over and over again, God did all these amazing things for you. You rebelled. There's going to be punishment. You need to get right with God. And here's the specific ways that you do that. Okay. So Um, so let's look a little bit more deeply. Now we're doing the Haftarot for Acharei, and this again comes from the book of Amos, chapter 9, verses 7 through 15. The Haftarah opens with a somewhat surprising statement where God makes um, sort of a comparison between what he's done for Israel and what he's done for other nations. He says, "Are you not like the children of Cush to me?" Some people say Cush is Ethiopia. "Did I not bring Israel up from Egypt and the Philistines from Cap, Kaftor and Aram from Kir?" Okay, so he's talking about four different nations: Cush, Israel, the Philistines, and Aram, and that he did things for each of these nations. The idea here, sort of the universal idea here, is that God is involved in the history of all peoples, not just Israel. And the Bible is a reflection of that. Every nation has a story that's guided by its own flavor of divine providence, what we call hashgacha pratit, the idea that God looks after each nation and has a journey for them, has a destiny for them. And that you can't necessarily say that one nation is more spiritually worthy than another, not based on ethnicity, but based on relationship and based on behavior. So, what is the Bible telling us here? It's saying, even if you're not Jewish, your spiritual path matters. The Torah is telling you that you, as someone who is not in the nation of Israel, not in the Jewish people today, that you're not outside of God's concern or God's plan. Now, the other sort of the deeper perspective on this is that elsewhere in the book of Amos, there's a theme that appears that the closer the relationship, the greater the accountability. So, one of the reasons why Israel, the nation of Israel, is judged more strictly is not because God is rejecting us, but because he has specific expectations for us. So every human being is accountable for their actions. More responsibility, though, is proportional to awareness. We have this expression in Hebrew. It's called tinok shenishba, which means I don't know literally what it means, but it refers to a child who was brought up without any Torah instruction. You cannot judge a child like that who doesn't know a single letter of the alphabet, who never heard of Shabbat, who doesn't know anything. You can't judge that person the same way that you would a person who has full knowledge of Torah, who grew up in a family where Torah was valued and passed on. Okay. So depending on um, how close a person is to God and to his expectations for them, that means not a sense of privilege, but greater responsibility. Being chosen, and I know this is a sensitive word, being chosen as a nation in any sense, whether it's you're chosen for a role, you're chosen for knowledge, you're chosen for influence, whatever, it means you have a greater degree of responsibility. It's not a sentence of privilege. Those that are closer to God actually get judged more strictly because their actions have greater impact and theoretically represent God's will in the world. So we sometimes teach our children, when you are out in the world, you are a representative of God. If you look at like a religious Jewish person, and people will judge the Jewish people based on how you behave. So that's a high bar. Here's another example. So our children grew up, they were the children of a rabbi. And that means that while they were still children and they were normal kinds of children, other people in the community who knew that they were children of a rabbi had a different standard for them that they might have had for other children. You can hear how that's possible. Okay, so let's look at a couple of biblical examples. Moshe was the best one, is the clearest, I think. Moshe was forbidden for entering the promised land, entering Israel with his people, because of a single transgression that we read in Bamidbar, in the book of Numbers, chapter 20, that he struck the rock rather than speaking to it, the way he was instructed to do it. Demonstrating that for somebody on his level, even a minor disobedience by a leader can lead to severe judgment. That's a good illustration of this principle, that the more you know, the higher the standards are for you, and the more you are punished, I guess, for what we could. For here's a good analogy. What we would excuse a 5-year-old for doing, we would not excuse a 25-year-old for doing, right? You can, so the more responsible a person is, and in this case, the more spiritually connected they are to God, the higher the expectation for them. The same thing is true of King David. When King David acted inappropriately, in this case, I'm speaking specifically about the incident with Bathsheba, he was confronted by the prophet Nathan, and he suffered consequences despite the fact that he repented. Okay. So he's also on a very high level, did a sin that maybe other people would not have been judged so harshly for. And the head prophet comes to him. That doesn't happen to me when I make a mistake, in order to chastise him. The prophet Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah, spoke all the time about um, how people who failed to fulfill their duty at whatever level they were at were severely corrected. So, in very plain language, if you know better, you're expected to do better, and that is true of all of us. So, in a way, there's I'm smiling because something just occurred to me that sometimes somebody, if you're Jewish and you are Torah observant, you might have somebody in your home who watches you do a certain thing. Let's say the way that you handle certain things in your kitchen on Shabbat, and they may correct you and say, you're not really doing that right. You're not supposed to do this, or you are supposed to do that. And sometimes you don't want to hear it um, because now that now you have to you have to do it differently. So because if you know better, you're expected to do better. And that means for all of us, as we grow in our Torah knowledge, as we grow closer to Hashem's expectations of us rise. If we are completely ignorant about godliness, if we have no sense that there is a creator and a sustainer of the world, if we have no biblical education whatsoever, that's a different level. You guys are not there. You're already like, in the intermediate course, or I don't know whatever level we're all at. But that is knowledge comes with God's expectation. Okay, I think I hammered that point enough. Let's go on. The Haftarot describes this powerful image of God shaking Israel among the nations like grain in a sieve, but not losing anything. What is he talking about here? He's talking about the idea that even when it's not immediately obvious to us, there is justice and corruption is eventually exposed, and that nothing truly meaningful gets lost in the process, which can be very, very comforting when we see what appears to be evil flourishing. But the idea here, the lesson here is that history is not random and that there is a moral structure to the world. But as we talked about last week, and I'm going to repeat it in this context, in Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 28, it talks about the hidden things belong to the Lord our God, but the revealed things are for us, meaning not everything is visible, not everything is understandable. There's layers and layers and layers of reality beyond human perception. So we live in a world where not all moral accountability is accessible to us. So this is the famous sort of philosophical religious question about why good people suffer or bad people appear to prosper. And it relates to this idea that we learned last week about the concept of Hester Panim, the idea of hiding the divine face. Again, Deuteronomy chapter 31 mentions God saying, I will surely hide my face on that day, meaning God's presence, which is I'm sort of equating it to the concept of justice, can be concealed, that the world can look to us as our tiny little human brains see it as if it runs without moral order. But the Torah teaching from the prophet Amos is that moral truth is a real thing, even if it's not obvious to us, even if it's not visible to us. The same image of the sifting that Amos is teaching about has another implication, and that is that a nation itself may undergo upheaval, but individuals are not erased within the collective. So you're not lost in the crowd. Your choices matter, even if the society that you live in is flawed. And I think that could be especially powerful for those of you who live in communities that may not reflect your values, right? Maybe other people in your world think it's silly or crazy, or they don't understand your attraction to Torah, your devotion to coming here every week and spending an hour with me, your participation in our community. What do you need that for, right? So it doesn't matter in God's world what's going on around you. He's watching you. And then this Haftarah ends with this vision of restoration, of rebuilding ruins and replanting vineyards and this permanent return to the land. And the sort of universal lesson here is that destruction is not the end of the story. That there's, as long as we're alive, as long as we are in this phase of history, there's always the potential for renewal, because God's ultimate direction is not towards chaos, it's towards repair. And if you go all the way back to the story of the Garden of Eden, it starts in chaos, right? Tohu vavohu. It starts with this undifferentiated mass, and then God makes order out of that. And so even though we may not live long enough in our lifetimes to see how things are working out, that doesn't mean that there's not a bigger picture going on. No matter how broken things seem, whether it's personally, like whatever's going on in your personal life, or globally, there's always a path back. There's always a path to restoration. And the closing verse of this Haftarah emphasizes this idea of, it's specifically speaking about the nation of Israel being planted and not uprooted again. But I think a meaningful life requires rootedness in values, in purposing, not necessarily like living in the same house your whole life, but your rootedness in deeper ideas. Because constant instability is not a good human condition. True freedom includes the idea of belonging to something bigger than yourself. You know, I went to a public high school, and I had a very good friend in public high school named Linda. And Linda was a Christian, very, very, very Christian. And she got married like the week after high school graduation. And so I'm 18 years old. I know nothing about the world or how it operates. And she told me, she said, marriage, like choosing your partner, it's paradoxical. Is that the word? And it's not what you would think. But she said marriage gave her tremendous freedom, because having made that choice, it gave boundaries to her life, and within those boundaries, she had tremendous freedom. That's how she expressed it. Counterintuitive. That's the word I'm looking for. It sounds counterintuitive, but that was what she said to me. And I think that the idea is that people flourish when they're grounded in something that is enduring. So for many of us, that is our love of God, our love of Bible, our love of Torah, our love of doing good things. Now, this Haftarah is speaking specifically to Israel. There's no getting around that, but I'm trying to extract something universal that. So here's the lessons, just to summarize before we go on to the next one. God guides all the nations. God holds all people accountable. God preserves every individual and builds the world toward this, what I would call a messianic vision of ultimate justice and ultimate restoration. And our task, whoever we are, whatever nation we that we come from, is to live with integrity in what is an unfinished process, knowing that within the larger story, our lives have meaning, our lives have purpose, our lives are part of something bigger. Okay. And with that, I'm going to end the little section on Amos and go on to the Haftarah for Kedoshim, which comes from Yecheskel, from the book of Ezekiel, chapter 20. And Ezekiel is talking about all these social sins, oppressing, like things that the Israelites are doing wrong, oppressing the strangers, mistreating the orphans and widows, exploiting the weak. And the universal lesson here is that a moral test of any society is how it treats people with the least amount of power, right? The orphan and the widow, the weak, the stranger. That strength is not measured by wealth or success, but by compassion. So a just life begins with how you treat people who can't necessarily, it's not like tit for tat, I do you a favor and you do me a favor. What we call in Israel, we call it protexia, where you know somebody in a position of power or influence and they can help you with stuff. If you have a bureaucratic problem, you get stuck, you call your friend, Chaim, who works in such and such an office, and he can fix things for you that you can't do for yourself. We're talking about, there's also another concept in Torah called Chesed Shel Emet, which literally the kindness of truth. It doesn't translate well, but the concept is um, doing something for a person who's passed away, preparing the body in a kosher way for burial, attending the burial, uh, treating it with respect, and so forth. That is true, true kindness, because that person has a way of repaying you because they're no longer of this world. And so how you treat people who cannot repay you, whether they're dead or it's a stranger or it's an orphan or if it's a widow or if it's somebody who's weak, that is a moral test for us. Ezekiel isn't just describing a thing here or there that somebody did, a specific sin. He's describing an entire system where leaders take bribes, officials abuse power, violence becomes normalized. And what he's saying is when a society tolerates wrongdoing, then it spreads through the entire system. Ethical failure is like contagious. If you leave it unchecked, it will just infect the entire society. And I think that's deeply relevant today because a lot of us see things that I'll call them morally skewed. And it is incumbent upon us to speak about this. I want to share an example of this. It does not make the Jewish people look that good, but I'm going to share it anyway. In certain parts of the Jewish community, there is a behavior that's relatively new. I'm talking like the last 10 years or so, of making it so that any images of women in media are wiped out. So I was watching this video made by a very nice man who was talking about the power of Emunah or something, the power of faith. And the video is sort of animated, and it's a very nice video, very nice message. Part of it takes place on a cruise ship, and I don't remember the analogy of it, but there's this cruise ship. The entire staff of the cruise ship is male, okay, but all the passengers on the cruise ship are male. And as the video goes on, every single image of Jewish people, there were zero women, zero girls. Now I know that was very deliberate, and I had a conversation with this guy, and I I said, I find this atrocious. This is like, it's not reality. And he said, yeah, but he wants this video to be shown in a certain type of school because he thinks the message is very important. And he thinks that that's more important than including women. And obviously, we did not agree on that. This is something I'm sorry to say that I hear pretty often. I want to show you something. This is something that I saw recently. I'm looking for. I practiced, by the way. This is a meme. All right, tell me if you can see this. Just nod your head if you're able to see what I'm showing. Okay. This is a meme that you see. I don't remember who this is, but this is some European guy during the pogroms. If I was more educated, I would probably know. Saying Jews and all the Jews are going running. And this obviously is Hitler, and all the Jews are going into Auschwitz. And this is obviously the Palestinians also. And he's making the point that, what they are blaming all the problems of the world on, we are a proud people. And you can see clearly in this meme that he was going for diversity, right? You have this like all the way to the right. I'm not sure if you can see my pointer. You have this Haredi looking man, and this is a man of color, and a younger man, and a guy in uniform. I think that's supposed to be an IDF uniform, and so on. He's clearly going for diversity among the Jewish people, except you cannot help but notice that there's no women in here. And I wrote to him also because this is somebody that I kind of know, I'm connected to him. And I said, this is not acceptable. He said, yeah, but the message is bigger. bigger than that. And he wants other people to see this message. I said, okay, so what you're saying is that you've chosen to throw Jewish women under the bus in order to make a different point. Anyway, in the end, he said um, something conciliatory. And the next meme that he created did have two women in it. But when I see stuff like this, I feel like this is um, there's something wrong with my people who do this. And the people who do this don't necessarily do it for themselves, like they don't want to see images of women, but they think that whatever they're producing, the media that they're producing, will be more widely received if they don't include any women, which is, to me, it is um, it's not just offensive, but I think that it is, I can't be silent about it because I think that it's a corruption of Torah values. And I feel like I must speak up about it. Okay. Let's go on. So Yecheskel is rebuking the people for defiling sacred things, for ignoring Shabbat, for acting unjustly, all of that kind of stuff. So what is the universal lesson? That ritual or spirituality can't compensate for unethical behavior. A religious person, like the two men that I spoke about who created this video that I didn't show you, but the meme that I did show you, that a religious person who harms other people is there's a pagam, there's a defect there. Okay, that is what I think that Yechezkel is saying, and a, a healthy society requires clear moral distinctions, because if everything is relative, then what follows is chaos. So we, as people who love God and want to do what is right by Him, have to appreciate that not everything is morally equal, that discernment matters. And I don't know, I'm assuming most of us are pretty right leaning politically, but you can see that in the left politically, this ability to discern between moral equivalencies is completely missing. And I think that Yecheskel would say, you guys have lost the thread, right? Love is probably, now I know that people who say that mean it um, with a kind of purity of intention, but it's a very morally ambiguous position to take. Okay, I lost my place. I'm skipping some of this because I really want to get to. So we also want to never underestimate the impact of a single righteous individual. So in the times of the prophets, sometimes they were the only ones who were, it's not a comfortable position to be in. You know, they're sort of fighting against their entire culture, the immorality in which they live. That's not a comfortable place to be. I I learned something this week about a historical figure that I had always thought was a righteous individual, and that is Mahatma Gandhi. I only recently learned that Mahatma Gandhi was apparently strongly opposed to Zionism, to Jews having their own homeland. And he famously suggested, this may be the most controversial thing that he ever said, was that the Jews of Germany should adopt nonviolent resistance against these Nazi atrocities, and that they should, this is the quote that I found, offer themselves to be shot or thrown into the Mediterranean rather than fighting back, believing that somehow doing that would soften the approach of the Nazis, which I find unpleasant at best. But I have to tell you this funny story. One year, my husband made a costume for Purim, where he pinned onto his clothes little tiny miniature hats and bite-sized candies, and he said, "Mahatma candy." I don't know if you get it. Mahatma candy, Mahatma Gandhi. Anyway, that was, my husband's a big punner. Okay. So again, the Haftarot in Yechezkel and Ezekiel is describing the consequences of corruption, breakdown of society, loss of stability, exile, and that the lesson is that a society can't sustain itself on injustice. It's not a question of just being punished; it's cause and effect, right? The So Yechezkel, Ezekiel is teaching that holiness is not an abstract concept. It's lived in how we build our societies. And a world without justice, a world without compassion, a world without moral clarity can't endure. Again, not because Hashem is going to come and throw a lightning bolt and destroy the whole society, but because the society is going to collapse internally on itself. And each person has power and responsibility to stand for what's right, even when others don't. And that's why the example that I gave you, why I spoke up, even though honestly, I don't think I'm going to change these guys' mind because there's something going on in our culture, in certain parts of the Jewish community that's just bigger than me. But I really feel like I have to say something. Okay, um, that's part one. Now I want to talk about what after I finished all that, and I kind of gave you an abbreviated version because I wanted to leave time for this. So yesterday was Yom HaAtzmaut. Many of you know this. It was the 78th anniversary of the founding of the state of Israel on the day of, it's the Hebrew month of Iyar, the fifth day of Iyar. And I want to show you something very cool. And for this, I once again I have to share my screen. And I had a little bit of trouble doing this when I practiced earlier. So I'm hoping that it works now. Okay. Can you see this chart that I made? You shake your head. It says Atbash system. Okay. I'm going to try to talk you through this and tell you that this system was devised in the mid 16th century by a Rabbi Yosef Karo. Okay. And basically, what he's saying is that I'll explain the Hebrew part of it to you anyway, but he's basically saying that we can know what day of the week certain holidays are going to fall on based on what day of the week a certain day in the Passover celebration fell on. Okay. And Atbash is a system that matches the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet and the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And then the second letter of the Hebrew alphabet to the second to the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So if you look here, I hope you can see where I'm pointing. The first letter of the Hebrew alphabet is Aleph, and the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet is Taf. Okay, that's like saying matching A to Z in English. The second letter of the Hebrew alphabet is Bet, and that matches Shin, which is the second to the last Hebrew alphabet. That's where this word Atbash comes from. It's a made up word. It's not like it doesn't mean anything. Okay. So he's saying that the first day of Passover, remember that Aleph has the numerical value of 1, right? Aleph matched with Taf says that whatever day of the week the first day of Passover was, that's the day of the week that Tisha B'Av will fall out on. And this works. I don't know how it works, but it does work every year. Bet, which numerical value of 2, the second day of Pesach is matched with Shin, and that stands for Shavuot. Okay. The third day of Pesach is Gimel. That matches with Reish, and Reish stands for Rosh Hashanah. Okay. You see where I'm going with this. So if you know what days in any given year, what day of the week, like let's say the first day of Pesach, I don't remember, it was maybe a Thursday. That means that Tisha B'Av will be on a Thursday, Wednesday night, Thursday. If the second day of Pesach is on a Friday, Shavuot, I think actually I'm accurate because Shavuot is Thursday night and Friday this year, and so on and so on. So it goes through Tisha B'Av, Shavuot, Rosh Hashanah, Simchat Torah, Yom Kippur, Purim. We get to the seventh day, okay, the day of Chet, the seventh day of Pesach. If you're counting 7 from the end of the Aleph Bet is an ayin, and there's no match for that in the 16th century. Okay. So the Atbash system, that's kind of how it was for hundreds of years. The seventh day of Pesach that corresponds with ayin has no partner. But in 1965, which is 17 years after the state of Israel is reestablished, there's a rabbi named Rabbi Amram Aborbe. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing his name right. He was then the chief rabbi of the city of Patach Tikva, and he wrote something really extraordinary. He said, in our time, we have been granted the knowledge that the seventh day of Passover corresponds to ayin, which that part we knew according to the Atbash code. The seventh day of Pesach is Yom HaAtzmaut. HaAtzmaut begins with the letter Ayin. So the seventh day of Pesach, which is the final day of the Exodus from Egypt, when the miracle of the splitting of the sea occurred and Israel's beginning of national freedom, right? Because now all their enemies are dead, is connected to Yom Ha'atzmaut, the day that symbolizes a second national freedom that was renewed in, well, I wasn't born in 1948. Some of you may have been, but the national freedom of our generation, that is the establishment of the state of Israel. So I thought that was very cool, and I wanted to share that with you. I hope that my explanation made sense. But let's go on. Outside of Israel, Passover is actually observed for 8 days. The Haftarot reading for the 8th day of Passover is never read in Israel because there is no 8th day of Passover in Israel. So the Haftarah of that day is actually read on Yom Ha'atzmaut. And it comes from Yeshayahu, from the book of Isaiah, chapter 10, verse 32 to chapter 12, verse 6. I'll do a little summary, and then I want to end by focusing on some of the a couple of verses that very, very much relate to what we're doing here. So the Haftarah of Yom Ha'atzmaut, and also of the 8th day of Passover outside of the land of Israel, is a prophecy by Yeshayahu, by Isaiah, regarding this messianic time to come. He foretells of a staff from the shoot of Jesse, who is Yishai, the father of King David. Okay, so there's a clear reference to the messianic figure, upon whom the divine spirit will rest, and who'll be able to judge everybody by way of smell. And okay, so we have a biblical reference to the Messiah. We also have in chapter 11, verse 6, this very, very famous line where the prophet tells us, that in that time, a wolf shall live with a lamb, a leopard shall lie with a kid, a calf and a lion cub, and a fatling shall lie together, and a small child shall lead them. Again, this is a prophecy of the Messianic era. I had a period of my life where I was following a vegan diet. And I prepared a Torah class. I taught it to Jews at the time, about how do we know that the vegan diet is actually the diet that God prefers for us to have in the Messianic era. And I talked about this, and I talked about the idea that if animals are not killing each other for food anymore, as this describes, sort of peace, they're lying down together, they're not, then we certainly should not be killing animals for food. That's an aside. Okay, anyway, Isaiah continues to describe how God's going to gather all the exiled Jews from all over the world, bring them home to the Holy Land. And in this newly constituted Jewish kingdom, the ancient rivalry between Judah and Ephraim, between the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom, will end. They'll join forces to subdue their historic enemies. And at that time, the Israel will sing God's praises and thank him for everything that he did and does. Even things that appeared to be punishment, like exile, will now be revealed. Their goodness will be revealed in disguise. Now, I want to finish with, and then I have this amazing video to show you, but I want to finish with the 3 verses in chapter 11 of the book of Isaiah, chapter 11, verses 10 through 12, because they are powerful verses. I'm going to read them to you, and then we'll talk about them a little bit, okay? Verse 10, and it shall come to pass on that day that the root of Jesse, again, a reference to Messiah, which stands as a banner for peoples, to him shall the nations inquire, and his peace shall be with honor. So I want you to hear the words peoples and nations in that verse. Then the next verse, verse 11, it shall come to pass on that day, again, these are messianic visions from Isaiah, the Lord shall continue to apply his hand a second time to acquire the rest of his people, meaning he will once again bring us back into the land, and they will remain from, and then he names different countries where the Jews have been exiled: Assyria, from Egypt, from Cush, from other places. And he shall raise a banner to the nations, and he shall gather the lost of Israel and the scattered ones of Judah. He shall gather from the 4 corners of the earth. Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit. The conventional function of this messianic banner is to summon Jews worldwide, all of the Jews that are in exile all over the world. And in this particular context, the messianic figure, Mashiach himself, acts as the flag, not only for the Jewish exiles, but for the Gentile nations who are seeking him. Okay, this is where you guys come in. It shall come to pass on that day that the root of Jesse, meaning Mashiach, which stands as a banner for peoples. To him shall the nations inquire, and his peace shall be with honor. Okay, so there's something about the figure of the Messiah that is going to attract the attention. To the Jews, it's going to say, come home. But to the nations, it's going to be an invitation to study and to learn. Okay. And this image is repeated 2 verses later in verse 12, because Mashiach is described as raising this flag for all nations. He shall raise a banner to the nations, which casts Mashiach as a universal teacher who's educating a broader audience. The exact content of his instruction is unclear in these verses, but I think we know what it is, because we've spoken about this so many times before, that part of the redemption of the Jewish people includes bringing along those people from the nations who want to be connected to this universal wisdom of Torah. Okay, so it's not a surprise what his instruction is going to be. It's going to be Torah. But also, presumably, he's going to purge other religions of their pagan influences and reinforce the commitment for everybody of the seven universal laws, the Noahide laws, the Shiva Mitzvot, B'nai Noach, whatever. The phrase in verse 10, to him shall the nations inquire, suggests not just a general interest in, but an active solicitation on the part of people who are not part of the Jewish people being regathered. So these things are happening simultaneously. So the banner that Mashiach represents, whether it's a physical banner or it's just his presence making an impression in the world, is calling to the Jewish people in exile, come home, come home, come home. But to the nations, it's saying, come to God, come to God, come to God. Not necessarily to come to Jerusalem, but to come to God. Okay. A banner on a flagpole is, in military terms, sometimes employed to mobilize soldiers to battle. But now it's going to be used to gather the nations to this utopian sense of peace that's centered around Jerusalem. And so what we have is a military symbol, right? This banner mobilizing soldiers for battle into a symbol of peace and universal Torah, and one that's consistent with the overall tone of this chapter, which is full of messianic prophecy, describing also harmony between otherwise predatory animals. And for that, we go back to verse 6 about the wolf living with the lamb and the shepherd lying with the leopard lying with the kid, and so on and so forth. So I think you can see why I always say that what we're doing here in our community is connected to Mashiach and is connected to Ula. Because I didn't actually know this until I was preparing class, but it is coming directly out of the vision of Isaiah in chapter 11. And then I want to end with a clip that I saw last night that actually, on the heels of Yom HaAtzmaut was over last night, around this time, and I was watching this video, and I want to play this clip for you. It's a few minutes, and then I'm going to end the class. And if you would like, those of you that are in the community, if you want to rejoin, I'm happy to open things up for Q&A as we generally do. Let me just try to find once again the. Give me a second. Want to share one more thing. Share the sound. Okay. Nope, that wasn't it. Thank you for your patience. Where is, oh man. Oh, wait. Okay. All right, I hope that you can see this. And I hope that you
Yes.
can
Have you
hear
ever
this.
been to Israel?
No, but I really want to go because the Philippines don't need visa whenever we visit Israel. That's how much you guys love us.
Iran, I love you, Iran.
I love Israel.
Where are you from? Lebanon?
Yeah,
Inshallah, we have peace very soon.
we need it.
I'm Palestinian. Our countries have beef, but that's them, not us.
And we are brothers, correct?
Exactly.
You're from Somaliland?
I love Israel.
من العراق. I love Israel. I'm Israel Khan.
أنا يمني.
You love Israel, correct?
بدنا السلام.
I'm from India.
I love India so much.
I know Israel.
Jai Hind, namaste. بدك السلام بين سوريا وإسرائيل?
Yeah, have Israel with us is better than have them against us. They're strong as so.
I love you, Kurdistan.
I love Israel too.
One day, Indonesia, Israel, best friends.
Amin, amin.
Malaysia, Assalamu alaikum. Hi.
Say good.
Maldives, you like Israel?
Bro, even wherever humans are there, we should love them.
I love Ethiopia.
Love Israel.
From Kenya, dude, I love Israel.
God bless you, and I hope to see you in Israel one day. Todos los gente en Israel, te amo mucho, Venezuela. We love Afghanistan here in Israel.
Peace will come to Israel and all the countries.
Habibi. Ana bahib UAE.
Oh, we love you guys.
I love Israel.
I love Thailand. China, you love Israel, yeah?
Yeah, I love.
From Israel, we love you in Rwanda.
I'm from West Papua. God bless Israel, man.
Wow. As an Israeli, I welcome you here anytime. It's your home as well.
Appreciate it, brother. We love you. We think you're all.
I love you guys. Min win inta. I'm really waiting for peace between our two countries, brother.
We're all one at the end of the day, man.
Where are you from, my brother?
From Turkey.
Wow, Gardash! We need to stand together, me and you, for peace.
That's right.
We love Nigeria.
I feel likewise for Israel.
Shalom.
I love you, Tanzania!
Love you too. Me encanta Israel, hermano.
We love Cuba. We love Nepal in Israel.
Thank you. We also love you.
I love Singapore.
We love you too.
Israel, love Sri Lanka.
We also love Israel.
In Israel, we love Bhutan.
We also love you, brother.
We love Fiji.
Love you too.
Fiji, first Israel, this island.
Yes! Israel loves the Aboriginals.
From Solomon.
Do you guys want to visit Israel someday?
Yeah, we want to visit Israel.
Hello, Israel.
I love you, Vietnam. In Israel, we love Dominican Republic.
Sawa.
Sababa. Kazakhstan, Israel, Druk, Salam.
Yes.
I love Israel, bro. From El Salvador.
Love you, brother. I love Azerbaijan.
Thank you, dude.
I found the most Jewish-looking Palestinian guy in the world.
I always say Shalom Alaikum.
Israel.
Afghanistan, Zindabad.
Thank you.
I'm Moroccan.
أهلا وسهلا في إسرائيل.
في تل أبيب إن شاء الله.
Okay, I'm from Saudi Arabia. We brothers.
Imagine if Saudi Arabia and Israel make peace.
That's good, man.
I hope you guys heard that. Okay, I'm going to end our class. And for those of you that want to join for a conversation, I'm happy to see you again.